the trick? Well, the trick is of itself a trick. Perhaps to better contextualize and understand the trick, I could regale you with a story that happened just this morning. You see, I was completing my morning ablutions, and I tend to dally a little bit following them. And so, eventually, I made my way downstairs to enjoy my soft-boiled egg and soldiers, and to my surprise and consternation, Dr. Watson was already there eating his. Now, my colleague and friend, Watson, knows full well that I don't like him to start his eggs before I have started mine. We must begin simultaneously, otherwise there is no joy in it. And so I glanced briefly at a letter addressed to myself, sat down, looking at the paper, and noticed a glare coming across from Watson. There was something, obviously, up with the chap. And so I asked him, "Watson, you've already started eating your eggs. What's on your mind, old boy?" And he turned to me and said, "Holmes, I think that I have discovered the secret to your inscrutable trick." Well, I must say I chuckled a little bit at first, and to which trick he was referring I wasn't entirely sure. But I humoured the chap, as it were. My duty as a friend, you know. I said, "Watson, what on earth are you talking about, and what such trick have you deduced?" And he said to me, "Holmes, allow me to demonstrate." And I said, "Very well, dear Watson, demonstrate." He turned to me and said, "Holmes, you are in a state of depression." Well, I said, "Well, however did you deduce that, Watson?" He said, "You have not shaved this morning, and you are usually a man who likes to upkeep his look and his vigour." And I said, "Well, fancy that, Watson. That's quite an incredible deduction. What else?" He looked me up and down and said, "Well, I think that there is a case that you have failed." I looked at him and said, "A case I have failed? What on earth do you mean, man?" He explained that I looked at the letter, which was addressed from Barlow, and that upon looking at it I had given a glare of disenfranchisement or distress. I said, "Watson, very good. You must have done this before." "And there was more," he said. He looked at me again and said, "Holmes, I think that you have run into a bit of financial trouble." And I said, "However do you know that, Watson? That's a very private thing." He said that upon looking at the financial section of the newspaper, a frown crossed my face. And I said, "Watson, you have truly deduced my trick, my superficial trick. You are a great detective." And he said, "Holmes, if 'twere so simple to begin with, then I would have done it all the time." Naturally, he was entirely incorrect, and for the benefit of his further education as a detective, I decided to explain to him why. "Yes, dear Watson, I haven't shaved this morning, but that is simply because my razor has been sent to be sharpened. And, my dearest, dearest Watson, the letter was not from a dissatisfied client, but in fact, it was from my dentist, reminding me that I had an appointment today, which I particularly did not want to go to. And finally, the financial section of the newspaper is located directly opposite the sports section of the newspaper, and I was disheartened to see that Surrey were losing against Kent. So, dear Watson, although the trick is something to learn, it is also something that can trick you." A simple, silly story, but chronologically it is important to this conversation, as it relates directly to the subject matter. Now, how does one go about correctly applying the trick? How does one go about correctly deducing from the appearance of someone who they are, where they have been, and what they have done. Well, allow me to explain a little. First of all, when someone enters a room, the first thing one should notice is how he or she enters. For example, do they peer around the corner of the door first? Do they pull the handle down, open, and then close without releasing the handle? Such signs are that of a thief or some stealthy rogue. Now, do they burst through the door, announcing themselves loudly to all there, or do they simply wander in as if the door were already open? Hints like this are some of the ways that you could immediately tell the humour of a person entering a room. Now, on to the nitty-gritty. What a man wears demonstrates not just his character, stature, and position in life, but also what he has already done. For example, if a man were to enter and he were covered in soot, where do you suppose he would have been? There are a number of options. For example, perhaps he was cleaning chimneys. Perhaps he was burning bodies. Perhaps he was grinding charcoal from the charcoal field. Or simply had an accident on the way. One can deduce the nature of these stains, these marks, based upon the context of them. So while a man may walk in covered in soot, perhaps the explanation isn't quite what it seems. Now, a person's shoes are perhaps the most important part of a detective's ocular assessment following the entrance of a person into the room. What kind of shoes are they? Are they Chelsea boots? Are they workers' boots? Are they fancy loafers? Are they German? Are they Italian? Are they French? Are they British? That is the first thing to look at. The next thing to look at is the condition of the shoe. Are they well kept? Are they newly bought? Are they old reliables, old faithful shoes that have been passed down in the family? Or are they somebody else's shoes? These are all things to consider when looking at someone who enters a room. You can learn so much just by examining from bottom to top what he or she is wearing. Now, it doesn't take a world-class detective to calculate that evidence can be found upon a person, but what about following a person? I am, of course, referring to footsteps. What has the person brought in with them? Mud, dirt, feces. All of these things give an indication not just to where the person might be from, but where they have been. And that can be used to deduce the level of guilt or the level of involvement in the case. After shoes and attire, one should look at a person's hands. Now the hands, much like the eyes, are representative of who somebody is. Are they kind hands? Are they workers' hands? Are they soft? Are they calloused? Are they elegant and wistful? Or are they bulbous and strong? Are there marks on the hands? Look under the nails. Have they been washed? Perhaps these hands could be used in manual labour, or perhaps they could be used to finesse an instrument of some kind, whether that instrument be musical or perhaps clinical. And also consider very carefully if the suspect or person involved is wearing gloves. Gloves during the summertime are a dead giveaway. Why would someone wear gloves when it is hot outside? Now, following that, of course, one must then look carefully now at the face. Does this face speak to you? Not literally, my friend. Don't be ridiculous. Does it speak to you in terms of a narrative? Is there a story behind this face? And if so, what kind of story? Where has this person been? Who are they? Why are they? These are all things to consider when examining a potential suspect. Now, let's say that someone bursts into a room. There are white chalky marks on the scuffs of their trousers, and their boots, workers' boots, are muddied. This person has a furrowed brow and is obviously distressed, and is carrying under his arm a parcel. This person also wears gloves. Now, what would we deduce immediately from this? The person has perhaps stolen the package, or perhaps is a murderer escaping with his mark. Well, how would we know? It's the postman. Now that might seem very odd to say, because you would know immediately that it is the postman indeed. But imagine this for a second, if you will. So, a person gives away a lot about themselves simply by being. Their occupation, where they've been, who they are seeing. Now, a postman wearing a uniform, you already know that they have been to a number of different addresses, a number of different places. But who are they? A postman isn't just a vocation, it could be a disguise. One must deduce through elementary the likelihood of someone being who they say they are. Yes, I say that the person who entered is the postman, but look at his trousers, look at his shoes. Does everything add up? Does everything make sense? Is everything logically in place? Now, consider, if you will, for a moment, if someone were not who they said they were. Imagine for a moment that someone were lying to you. How does one deduce a lie from the truth? Well, there are a number of giveaways. The movement of the eyes, the positioning of the eyes, perspiration down the face, and where they touch themselves on their face too. Are they touching their cheeks? Are they touching their necks? Are they touching their nose too many times? Well, all of these things are indicative of falsehood, indicative of someone misleading you, but do these people perform these actions anyway? The trick is the trick, and it is difficult to master, but once you have mastered it, you can read a person very, very quickly and deduce not only their motives, but who they are, where they have been, where they are going, and who they have seen. So, whilst Watson's attempt at the trick was admirable, to say the least, with no context to my behaviour, with no understanding of what I had just been through, he couldn't get it right. Now, how would you know that I hadn't shaved because my razor had been sent off to be repaired? How could you know that the letter I received was from my dentist and not from an upset client? And how could you know that I was upset by the score in the cricket rather than the financial report? Detective work, of course, my dear. Detective work. The trick only works in conjunction with good old-fashioned detective work. And if you don't complete the detective work, there is no context for the trick. Now, having said that, when one fully masters the trick, one can ascertain almost instantaneously the origin and the direction of an individual, which is a powerful tool to have, to be sure, but one not to be used lightly. Mistakes can happen. Mistakes have happened. Not on my part, of course, but in the world. Assumptions shouldn't be jumped to, and presumptions shouldn't be catered. The most important thing that one can do to master the trick and to solve the case is diligent detective work. And so if you fancy yourself, Mr. Watson, greeting me in the morning with presumptions and inaccuracies, then the very, very least that you can do is wait before you eat your soft boiled